I will call the Monday, November 20th meeting of the Verona Common Council to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll call, please. Ms. Clark?
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle.
Here.
Alderperson Gaskell.
Here.
Alderperson Linder.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvray.
Present.
Alderperson Reekie.
Here.
Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
Alderperson Touche.
Present.
We have everyone present. Thank you for that. Next, we will have public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening? Anyone from the public? I only see city staff in the audience, so we will move on. Included in your packet were the minutes from November 13th meeting of the Common Council. What's your pleasure? We have a motion by Ms. Reekie. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. The minutes are approved. Under mayor's business, I just want to bring up, we followed up with the conversation we had at the last meeting about announcements. And a number of us looked at the ordinances. I know I looked at them over the weekend. And in our ordinance, it does talk about the order of business for the meetings. But then the final sentence, right before it gives the order, it says the following order may be observed in the conduct of all meetings of the council. So I would say that based on whatever the consensus of the council is, if you want to see us move up announcements earlier in the meeting, we can do that rather than having the announcements at the end. I'm seeing head shake in agreement. So we will, beginning with the next meeting, move announcements up. Thank you. Okay. That concludes my report for this evening. So we will go to the administrator's report. Mr. McCorsky, please.
Thank you. Just a reminder of council's meeting next Monday, the 27th. That's a joint meeting between city and the school district. That's at 6:30. Also, the meeting in December, there's only going to be one meeting in December. That's the 18th. Again, that's at 6:30 as well. Just an update on the council chambers. We'll be making the upgrades to the council chamber video and display December 13th, I'm sorry, 12th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. So that'll, when we come back for the 18th council meeting, those changes will be already taking place. December 1st, the tree lighting at Hometown Junction starts at 5 o'clock. And December 2nd, the Saturday at 12:30, there'll be an ice sculpture demonstration and other ice sculptures sponsored by local businesses downtown. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Steiner, please?
Mr. CA, isn't that
Brad, is
Central Park?
Thank you.
I think the tree lighting with Gary Canolti is at Central Park.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the tree, the ice demonstration is at the Hometown Junction.
That's correct. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. And also the chili dinner is at the senior center, so bring the family. There's no charge.
That was good. Any other questions for Mr. McCorsky? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the engineer's report. Mr. Monpass, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sent out the engineer's report via email last week. There isn't any real update from what you saw last week in the past 7 days. We're still working on the plans, but there's nothing significant to report.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Seeing none, we'll move on then to committee reports. We'll begin with the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the item 9A1, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the monthly bills in the amount of $103,435.32.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the way of explanation, two of the larger items from this month's bills, the first being to Burke Truck and Equipment, Inc. For a second half-tons equipment package for plow, that amount $39,648.75. And second being to Ellers for the TIF 9 implement and TIF 4 and 6 reports, that amount $17,500. And just for the record, let it reflect that AECom didn't have a bill this month, which, as Mr. Monpass said, there was nothing to report on the engineer's report.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvery. Any questions for the Finance Committee or for city staff? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve the payment of bills in amount totaling $103,435.32. All those in favor of the payment of bills signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you. Under item 9A2, I'd like to make a motion to open a public hearing on the 2018 City of Verona budget.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are in the public hearing stage. Mr. McGilvery, Mr. McCorsky, anything that you wanted to state? I know there's no one here in the public for the public hearing, but is there anything that we want to make any statements prior to?
We can,
Or just hit the highlights like you did
Sure.
in the Finance Committee, if you would?
sure. The 2018 proposed budget includes a 1.86% increase in the amount of levy collected. That totals. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's a 1.86% increase in the amount of levy collected, roughly $243,295 of increase in levy. The general fund increases around $500,000 from both increase in levy and other revenues such as permits, licenses. Those are the larger areas of the increase. The levy increase was due to net new construction mainly. For the budget itself, what we're able to do with the increase in funding, we'll be adding 3 full-time positions, 1 police officer, 1 senior center case manager, and 1 public works inspector. We hope the position of public works inspector will help reduce additional funding in the future as projects come up. Less funding would be needed for the borrowing to cover inspection services. We'll also be adding Sunday hours for the library. That's right now it's a pilot project that would be during school session. We'll be providing a 3% cost of living adjustment for non-represented employees. In 2018, the represented employees of both fire and police are also getting a 3%, so all city employees would be at the 3% COLA level. We'll be using levy funds to pay more than 50% of the mill and overlay street program. $200,000 of fund balance will be added to the levy to reduce the borrowing needed for mill and overlay. We'll be maintaining funding levels for equipment and facility replacement funds, again, in an approach to reduce future borrowing needs at a level of $510,000. And again, the budget is the 4th budget for the city portion of the taxes that will it's the 4th budget that the city does not increase taxes, and the 3rd reduction in taxes over the last 4 years. That'll be a mill rate will be 4.32% reduced from the 2017 budget. That's $5.77 per thousand assessed value. In regular dollars, for a $282,000 home, it's about a $73 savings. A $400,000 home, it's about a $104 savings.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that that's helpful for people that may be watching at home. When we're talking about a total tax levy of over $13 million for the city, certainly we don't want anyone to think that it hasn't been a major discussion, and a lot of work for Finance Committee, for myself, for city staff working on the budget. So this is extremely important to have discussion on this, but a lot of the work has already been done, and that's the point that I wanted to make. Sometimes when we do bonding or make really big multi-million-dollar decisions, it seems like we just pass it with very little discussion. And this is extremely important, so I wanted to make sure that we had some information out there for the public. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak during the public hearing. Anyone that wishes to speak? Anyone that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carried. We are now on agenda item 9A3. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A3, I will make a motion to approve resolution number R-17-057, approving the 2018 City of Verona budget.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Linder. Mr. McGilvray?
I don't have anything to add other than, you know, I have appreciated all the work that the staff does put into this. You know, it starts in late summer, and it goes every couple of weeks for us, but it's happening every week for the people who are actually preparing these budgets, and I certainly appreciate all the work and effort that goes into it, because ultimately, you know, we get to vote on it, but we don't really do the hard work. We have time invested in it, certainly, but the hard work happens before we ever even see the numbers. We get to make recommendations back to them. So I just want to say thank you for that work that's been done this year and years in the past.
Thank you. Anything else that anyone from the Finance Committee wants to add at this point? Not seeing any. We have a few amendments, so we will start working on the amendments. Mr. McCorsky, how do you want to proceed?
We have amendment number 1. Alder Diaz requested reducing the fund balance to 34%. That's within the target range from that we've got a policy of 25 to 35%. We would request a motion on the amendment.
Mr. Diaz?
Sure, I will make a motion to take $257,074 from the fund balance and use it to offset borrowing.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Mr. Diaz, you're the author, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak first.
Yeah, thank you. I think that right now things are going pretty well financially. However, I think our city debt is too high, all things considered. We have Epic on the tax roll. I don't feel like we should be borrowing this much money, especially when you consider a potential new public works building, discussions about a city pool, a ladder truck for the fire department, all these things. I think we have a lot of potential debt coming up, and I think that interest rates are probably going to go up because they've been at historic lows, so we can't count on that. In the finance report from Ellers, that was listed as one of the challenges for the city, and you know this isn't going to solve it, but I think it's a step in the right direction to say we're taking it seriously and we're not borrowing unnecessarily.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Any additional comments? Ms. Doyle?
I would agree that we need to make sure that we're keeping check on our city debt, but one important thing that came up at the Finance Committee tonight was our finance director brought up the point that we should be setting more money aside for potential payroll liabilities, including sick time and possibly even vacation. So the discussion centered around it might be better if we're decreasing the fund balance to set that aside and earmark it for those uses to just make sure that we're prepared for that if it does come up.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Additional comments, questions? Mr. Linder?
I was just wondering if it would it make sense that Mr. Lamers tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Mr. Lamers?
Looking at the fund balance policy, one of the things that I'm used to where I come, places I've been, is usually you do an assignment of fund balance policy for your unfunded liabilities that are out there. One of the things that the city has is sick leave on the books, and what the policy is, if an employee is here over 10 years, they can get that sick leave paid out once they leave. So what I did is I went through a calculation, and at this point where the city is with their sick leave would be about $477,773 as an estimate. So what typically happens is you take from the unassigned balance and move it to the assigned balance, so you're covered with those liabilities in the event of payouts. Which you reduce your unassigned fund balance to stay within that target of 25 to 35%. That way you're covered with all your liabilities within the city.
So this is something that Brian and I and Jeff were talking about since late last week. I think that this makes a lot of sense. Personally, I don't have an issue with being over what our range is for reserve, because as your budgets grow, as your base grows, the next year you need more money than you did the prior year. So, I don't want it to be excessive, but I don't have an issue with being a little bit over. But I agree. I think that we should set aside. In the past, we've just been, if we have a situation where someone retires and there's unpaid sick time, we pay it out. We just pay it. But we really have nowhere where we can take it from other than reserve. So this way, by designating a portion of the reserve for that future unfunded liability, makes a lot of sense to me. It's no different than what we've done with the EMS a few years ago that we started that practice. So I completely agree with the comments that Brian made. Jeff can express his opinion as well. But I believe that we would be much better served if we really want to get into that range, that we take, and I just throw out the number of $250,000 from reserve and designate that for future unfunded sick days for payout, would be my thought. Mr. Diaz?
Can that be done as part of the budget process?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make a substitute motion to move the amount of $257,074 into an assigned fund for the purpose of paying out for cashed out sick leave for city employees.
So we have a motion. Mr. Diaz, are you okay if you are amending your first motion?
A substitute motion would accomplish the same thing. If it passes,
Yeah.
then the original motion would go away.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we have a substitute motion by Mr. Diaz.
I think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we'd also need to change so that it's assigning, it's not creating a fund, it's assigning that money within the fund balance. Correct?
Mr. Lamers?
I'm not sure if you need a budget amendment for that, because that's something that when we do that at the year end, we would just assign that. It wouldn't be part of the budget process.
Well, I think, just my opinion, I think that if we're going to go this direction, I think everyone wants to feel comfortable tonight that that's what we're doing to make sure that it does happen. So the vehicle by which that happens doesn't really matter to me as long as we can accomplish that.
Okay.
We do have a motion, but yes, Mr. McGilvray?
So the motion would need a second.
Yes.
I would second that. And I would say that it would probably be more appropriate to make it as part of the budget process so that it's defined that way, rather than, you know, relying on adjusting the books at a later date.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the amendment? Ms. Doyle?
I'm in favor of the spirit of the amendment, but don't agree with the amount, so I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the motion? Mr. Touche, please.
I'd like to, Mr. Diaz, how did you come up with this number?
Basically, it was to just bring the amount down to 34%, because then we're still at the top level, and it got rid of the stuff we were over. I'm assuming Brian calculated it.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on the motion? Mr. McGilvray?
I would just like to ask my colleague Liz if she could highlight what you're thinking beyond not being supportive of the
Ms.
amount.
Doyle, please.
Certainly, and this came up at finance. In light of upcoming amendments, I feel more comfortable with an amount of $225,000.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments on the motion? Questions or comments? Mr. Diaz?
I would like to make a motion to amend my motion to the amount of $225,000.
We have a motion to amend to make the amount $225,000.
Second.
Second, was that Ms. Gaskell? Yes, it was. Second by Ms. Gaskell. We have a motion to amend the amount to $225,000. Questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, this is on the amendment to reduce the amount to $225,000 designated for the unfunded sick time payout. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Was that Mr. McGilvery? Was there anyone else? Mr. McGilvery voted no. That amendment passes. We are on amendment number 2.
Before I get to amendment two.
Point of order, that
Oh,
was we
I'm
voted
sorry.
on the amendment, but not the main motion.
You're correct, thank you. So we have to go back to the substitute amendment as amended from the 257,074 to 225,000. We need to take care of that motion. Is there a motion? Or, we call the question. Are there any further questions now on the motion as amended? Mr. Diaz?
Not a question, just a general comment. I still think our debt is too high, but I think we got to cover on unfunded liabilities, and I think putting this towards potential sick time payouts is also a good thing to do.
Thank you. Mr. McGilvray?
If you could just for the record, and the public, maybe illuminate exactly what we'd be voting on at this point.
You want us to clarify? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? So the substitute amendment, as originally proposed, would take $257,074 from the reserve account and designate it for unfunded future liability for sick leave payout.
Didn't we just approve 225?
Right, that was the original, and then it was amended to reduce that amount to $225,000. So if passed, if approved, we would now be designating $225,000 from reserve to the new unfunded liability for sick leave payout.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Questions, comments on the motion? Just one thing I wanted to add, I think the $225,000 is a good start. As Mr. Lamers mentioned, according to his calculations, the total amount would be about $477,000. So it doesn't cover 100%, but it gives us a good start. All those in favor of the substitute amendment as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. We are now on agenda item, or amendment number 2. Mr. McCorsky?
Yes, amendment number 2 is from Alder Gaskell, requesting $30,000 for a City of Verona housing study and needs assessment, and requested out of fund balance. We require a motion on that.
Are there any motions? Ms. Gaskell?
I would like to make a motion to approve $30,000 to fund a housing needs and assessment study for the city of Verona.
We have a motion by Ms. Gaskell. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Doyle. Ms. Gaskell, you're the author of the amendment. Would you wish to speak on it?
Yes, please, thank you. Based on our neighborhood plans that are coming online and discussion at the Plan Commission, rightly so, that discussions of housing and workforce needs assessment should not be included in neighborhood plans at that level, that it needs to be at a higher level. I'd like to see us examine that critically, actually get some information that's specific to our city and not just anecdotal and conversational. And I think it would be a benefit to our new economic development person, whatever title that is going to be, as well as just all of the development that's coming online as well. I spoke with Mr. Valerius at MSA to get a ballpark figure, scope of services. He thinks 30,000 would be appropriate. I spoke with Mr. Sayer, and he is comfortable with this, and also his preference is that we do hire an outside contractor for this work.
Questions or comments on the amendment? Ms. Doyle?
I do think that this is an important study that we should employ someone to take care of for the city, and I do agree that an outside firm would be good for this. I'm not 100% on board with utilizing MSA though, and this again was something that came up at the Finance Committee level, is there are other entities here in the area, CARPC and both folks at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Urban Planning Department that have already done similar assessments for the entire county, and we might be able to get a study for Verona at a lower cost than $30,000. I am still supportive of this amendment because I think it would be good to have some money set aside, and I'm comfortable with $30,000. I'm just wonder if anyone knows what the process moving forward. This doesn't lock us into using one particular firm for this study, correct?
That'd be correct. We're not specifying any entity. Mr. Touche, please.
How would that be decided?
I would say it would have to come back to the council. Mr. McGilvray, you had your hand up? Ms. Doyle covered it? So,
Can I ask for clarification, Mr. Touche? How would what be decided? Who we hire?
Correct.
Okay.
my thoughts on this amendment is, and I had conversations today with CARPC, and I mentioned this at the Finance Committee tonight. I think that's where Ms. Doyle got the information from CARPC. They released this summer 2017, what they call the Regional Trends 2017 Population and Housing Report. They take a look at regional trends in population and housing. They take a look at indicators, population trends, housing trends, connecting growing population to affordable housing. They have their conclusion, then they have their data. It's a pretty good document. I certainly personally, some of my opinions don't match up with some of the things that are said in the report, but I think it has a lot of the information that we'd be looking for as a city. I also had a conversation this afternoon with Steve Steinhoff, and he indicated that they had done a report for the Village of Waunakee, which is a 20-page report. I forwarded it on to Mr. McCorsky, and I know, Ms. Doyle, I don't know how closely you looked at it, but you saw it at the Finance Committee. They can do that type of report for $0. So my suggestion to the council is, rather than designating any money for a study at this point, that at least we give CARPC or someone the opportunity to come in and do the study free of charge. I don't see any need why we need to spend either money from reserve or from the taxpayer levy to fund this type of study. And then I don't know if it'll be my final comment, but my final comment for right now is that even though I don't agree with everything, my personal opinion of some of the things that are in the study, I think it's that it's important that it's out there for people to see and hear and discuss. But in the end, I think we should be making decisions on housing based on what people that elect us to office want, not what somebody else is telling us that doesn't necessarily live in the city of Verona. I think it's extremely important that we have those conversations. I've had a lot of conversations over the last several months, and that's why I feel very strongly about that. That in the end, it should be us making a decision for what the people in Verona want, not what someone else wants. So that's my thought, but I'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Doyle and then Mr. Diaz.
Another thing that came up at finance tonight is we're not making decisions based on what other people want. We're making decisions based on state compliance. Our comprehensive reports require us to provide housing for a range of incomes, and that's included in our current comprehensive plan. This is a tool that could help us be in statutory compliance and adhere to those Wisconsin state statutes. And it's also something that if you look at the data and the range of incomes of the community that we serve is evident throughout that data. So I believe this is important. Just again, it would be fantastic if we can get a study for a much lower price than this, but I think it's important to have this set aside and serve as a placeholder to make sure that the city follows through on this commitment.
Mr. Diaz?
Yeah, I just want to say two things. One, I've never actually been pressured by anyone outside the city of Verona, so I have no idea what that's about. But I have talked to, and my second point is I have talked to people from the city of Verona, and there's a lot of people concerned about affordability and concerned about what kind of community we're building. I mean, I've said before, I'm someone who is, in the past, I worked at Epic, I'm a former Epic employee. And so I know in part I'm to blame, or people like me are to blame for rising housing costs, but I fully understand the city isn't just for people like me. And I want to see a city that's good for a lot of people at different working people at different income levels. So I think that this study is a good idea.
Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a question or a comment. The implication, I think, from Ms. Doyle's comments are that we are not meeting statutory requirements, and until that's, I guess, been defined otherwise, I can't really argue against it. I would say that it seems that if the data is out there and we can get it for a relatively small amount, to at least say, to meet the question that I think is being raised about statutory requirement, why we wouldn't pursue something that is less expensive. I don't know why we wouldn't do that first. That's the way I'm looking at this.
And I think, I'll just respond to that. I think that if, I don't know the answer to that this evening, but I would think that if we would ask CARPC to see whether or not we're following state regulations, I'm sure that that's something that they could do.
Mr. Mayor, do you
Yes,
have an
go ahead, Ms.
idea?
Gaskell.
Do you have an idea of the caseload of CARPC right now? Are we looking at 2 years, 3 years that they would be able to get to this?
The conversation I had with Mr. Steinhoff this afternoon was that if all the municipalities within Dane County asked for this, there's no way that they would be able to do it. But there's no one else right now that has asked for it other than the village of Wanakee. So I would think if the council is supportive of having CARPC do this work, we notify them tomorrow that we want to have this done. And Ms. Gaskell, is what the time that they would need to complete the study, I'm not sure, but I would think we would contact them right away. Mr. McGilvray?
Noting that I'm not going to be here when that you likely would take this up again, certainly I think Brian mentioned there, you have the opportunity later, if you get this information from CARPC, direct them as quickly as you can and see if we can't be first or second in line. If you need additional information, it seems there's room within the budgeting moving forward if you needed to engage another study. I'm not disagreeing with whether or not we need to address that. I'm just saying maybe we should start with what we know we can get for a relatively small amount of money, and then the next step would be what you're saying in this case, engaging a full-blown study if that's necessary.
And just in response to that, I believe that CARPC would be willing to do additional work. If we ask them to, it may cost us. Mr. Linder, please.
Yeah, to me, if we can get this, this information and from CARPC for zero, I think we should go there first. And if it's not, turns out not what we wanted, then we can always use contingency funds in the budget to create a different study down the road.
Thank you. Other comments?
Just to address your comments earlier, Mr. Mayor, about outside influences, when I was doing my doors, that was a topic that we discussed between me and the people answering the door in my district. And just anecdotally, I contacted Dean Gurrell to find out, just out of curiosity, how many Verona area school district staff live in Verona, and it's only 34%. And a lot of that has to do with being a single teacher and not a dual income family. They cannot afford to live in Verona. police force is in a similar situation. 2 of our police staff of the entire department actually live in Verona. So I think we do have a gap, and we need to address that gap.
Just in response to that, and I don't want to get too far off the amendments, when we talk about affordability, one of the things that we're doing in this budget, 4 years in a row without a tax increase, 3 years with a decrease. So when people talk about that they cannot afford to live in Verona, then where can they afford to live? You take a look at what some of our neighboring communities are doing in their budgets. No one do I know that is going to have, on an average home, approximately a $75 decrease. So this council and past councils have done a really good job of trying to make living in Verona affordable. So we have to be careful when we talk about affordability and affordable housing, because it means different things to different people. So I think, again, I would urge you to defeat the amendment and instead, at no cost on the tax levy, that we, if approved, that tomorrow we contact CARPC and ask them if they will do the same type of report that they did for the Village of Wanakee. Additional comments, questions? Mr. Steiner, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As I travel around the district, one of the comments I tell folks when they start asking about the cost of living is, I ask them, well, if your property taxes are $5,500 on your home, that means you are spending $16 a day to live in that home on property taxes. And they look at me like, how did you get that number? I said, well, it's a general number. Is that a normal house in Verona? I don't think I can say that. But I do know that if your house is evaluated at about $250,000 to $300,000, you're paying about $5,500 in property taxes, and that's only $16 a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. On the amendment, any additional comments, questions? Mr. Linder?
Just a point of clarification then, so if this budget amendment is defeated as it is, will there be a chance to change it so we request a city housing study from CARPC on a separate motion, or do we need to modify this motion to have CARPC do this?
We could modify it, or we could work by consensus. We could, direct the city administrator to contact CARPC tomorrow.
Okay. We'll stick with the motion then.
Okay. Further questions on the motion? Ms. Reiki?
I think I'm comfortable supporting this motion just in case the CARPC study that's free or less money doesn't give us all the answers to all the questions that we might have, because I think it's important to do a study of this kind, and if we can do it for less than $30,000, great. If not, I'd like to earmark the money.
Thank you. Mr. Lamers, just a question for you. The $30,000 additional on the levy, actually, it's not coming from levy, it's coming from fund balance. Okay, forget about that. Questions, comments? Questions or comments? Seeing none, a vote, and a yes vote would be to fund the study at $30,000. A no vote would be to not fund the study. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
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 We have the ayes raise their hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. The vote is 4 to 4, and I will vote no. The amendment fails. Yes, sir. Mr. McIlvery.
So would it be appropriate at this time to talk about consensus of whether or not the council would like to have you or Mr. McCorsky pursue an agreement with CARPC to provide the data that you've mentioned?
I don't want to get too deep into that conversation, but
I'd like to have it, it's obvious it's important to everybody here for different reasons, but I think it'd be important to have that direction.
okay. I've not heard from anyone that does not want us to proceed with this. Is that correct? Okay, well then I would ask Mr. McCorsky to contact CARPC tomorrow to request if they do a study similar to what the village of Wanakee got. I would also ask Mr. McCorsky to send a copy of the Village of Wanakee report to the full council. And if we can, we have another meeting next Monday. So I would just ask if there's anything else that we would like to see in the report, and if we can have it included with CARPC, please contact Mr. McCorsky. Mr. Touche, please.
I've done a lot of budgets in my professional career, and even though there may not be a line item for it, doesn't mean we still can't do it. It just means, this is still in our general fund. We as a council can decide, we don't like what CARPC is giving us, and we can decide we want to study. All this amendment did is really set a dollar amount, and I really like hearing that after serving on CARPC and knowing what they do, I think they will give us the kind of report we need. I wouldn't consider this a defeat. I think it's really a win because it's created discussion which we haven't had. So.
All right, amendment number 3, Mr. McCorsky, please.
Thank you. Amendment number 3 is a $30,000 increase in the levy for a study to discuss Badger Mill Creek as an impaired river, and would request a motion on that amendment.
Are there any motions at this point? Mr. Diaz?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to slightly alter the motion, which I'll give in a moment, but instead of taking it from the levy, I'd like to take it from the fund balance because of our earlier motion to reduce the amount as $225 instead of $250. So I will make a motion to designate $30,000 from the general fund to be used to study ways the city can improve the water quality of the Badger Mill Creek.
Go ahead. We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, Mr. McGilvery, please. Mr. Diaz.
Thank you. This came to my attention on Thursday of last week, actually, but the DNR has tentatively declared the Badger Mill Creek an impaired river or body of water due to the amount of phosphorus in it. There, in my mind, are potential sources from where the problem could be originated, and I think that we should be responsible stewards of the land. We should protect our water quality, both for us now and for our kids and their kids and any other future Verona residents. I think that this is a good amount to get started to do our duty basically and make sure we take care of the Badger Mill Creek.
Thank you. Questions or comments on this motion? Ms. Doyle, please.
I was wondering if Alder Diaz might be able to elaborate on those sources, because again, at the Finance Committee level, we spoke about this motion, and it seems like the identified sources would be outside the jurisdiction of the city of Verona. So I'm just wondering where the value-added part of this study would be.
Mr. Diaz?
Yeah, it is possible that they're coming from there. It could be something with Madison Met as well. I think that this study would figure out exactly where they're coming from and potentially work on mitigation issues. It's entirely possible that we will not be able to get whoever's fault it is to fix what they do. But if we don't take the first step, we can't identify the problem. And even if they won't step up and do what they're supposed to do, there's things we could do for mitigation efforts if we study it.
Additional questions, comments? Mr. McGilvery, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback on I think what Ms. Doyle was alluding to, the discussion we had at Finance, I think it's pretty obvious that the mitigating factors that are creating this problem within the Badger Mill Creek are outside the city of Verona, and they are upstream. We're not going to be able to do anything to that with basically the systems that were built, into place are not doing what they should be doing in order to have the kind of quality of water that you're talking about. And short of arm twisting, which we really have no leverage over the entities that are responsible for those bodies of water, I don't feel like this is a good use of city taxpayer money. Identifying the problem, I think the DNR has already pretty clearly identified there is a problem with the quality of water in the Badger Mill Creek. It's something that I think people in the city of Verona and Prior Public Works committees have discussed this. It's not something that we can fix. It's going to have to be City of Madison, and the way their systems were designed and the way, the way the system was designed. That's the problem. That's the head of the river or the creek, and I can't support the amendment for that reason.
Ms. Doyle, please.
Additionally, I know Dane County is doing a lot of work here in the area around phosphorus mitigation, and so this just seems like it would be a duplicate effort, especially if this isn't going to result in any actionable tasks that the city can undertake. I'm fully in support of the county's efforts, but again, just don't see where this is a value-added piece.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Diaz, please.
Thank you. I would just like to point out there are things we could do. We cannot, I don't think we can necessarily solve the problem, but a study could give us ways we can mitigate things with like different retention ponds, wetland stuff, and how we could do things in the city. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to solve all the problems. I don't think we can solve all the problems, but I think we can still do our part to mitigate the impacts.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Linder, please.
Where did the $30,000 number come from?
Mr. Diaz?
It was just a estimation on my part.
Additional questions, comments? Mr. Touche, please.
I completely agree with, if the city can do something, I think that we should look at it. But I'm also kind of like to see some evidence, you know, from the DNR saying, hey, you know, we're seeing some concentration coming from the city of Verona area. Yeah, let's figure this out. You know, I think about just being on Public Works and what we've done for, you know, when we have large rain events and trying to mitigate all the extra water that's going into the sewer system that Madison Sewer District's dealing with. Hey, Verona, you got a problem? We invested a lot of money to find it. We're still resolving the problem. I would like to see some similar kind of data coming from the DNR saying, hey, lot of phosphorus coming out of the Verona area. Makes sense to me. But when it's, I mean, I'm looking at the list and it's the whole creek, which, as it said before, I mean, includes Madison and a lot of other municipalities. It's hard for me to think this is a good use of $30,000. So in general, in principle, I agree with it. Give me some data. And then maybe when we have time to figure that, I could support something like that. So I think it's a great idea in general. Thank you.
Mr. Linder, please.
So kind of piggyback on Mr. Touche, would it make sense to make a couple calls to the DNR and ask them what, I mean, they've just basically declared it an impaired river, but they have some ideas for us instead of spending $30,000 on it, just have them give us some suggestions on what maybe we could do, or if we're creating any problem with it, as opposed to spending $30,000.
Other questions, comments? I think just to tag on to the last two speakers, I think we should have a conversation with the DNR. Also, Dane County is doing a lot of work on phosphorus, and we certainly can have some conversations with them. I would agree with the comments that were made that if we know that we are the source of some of the problems, that we should be taking a look at that. We have our Public Works directors in the audience this evening. We have our Parks directors here as well. If we are aware that we are the cause of some of the problems, we should be dealing with that. I don't think that the study is necessary, and I don't support the $30,000 for the study.
Mr. Mayor, can we
Yes,
ask for
Mr.
staff
Gasko.
opinion, please?
Sure. Mr. You're coming up first, Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Part of the water quality components of why this is deemed an impaired water body, I'd have to look into that, but some of the upstream factors, the watershed is square miles. It's not a small area like one of our detention basins takes within the city. I don't know the exact size of the watershed, but I want to say it's anywhere from 10 to 15 square miles. So looking at the actual area that Verona drains into, the area you can take, the lands east of Main Street, roughly that's what contributes to the Badger Milk Creek directly through the channel at Lincoln Street that we just improved this summer. One of the other items that is in the capital improvement program that I want to continue looking forward is the detention basin right behind the seats that you're sitting in and I'm looking out towards, is the regional facility that will take a lot of the area within the city of Verona that is not treated by stormwater. The city of Madison also built one of the largest detention basins, retention basins. They each have their own meanings, right off the bypass of 151 in the mid-90s, and that area takes a significant amount of water and treats it to the best available technology that is available right now. Phosphorus is it's new to the northern climates for treatment. The only way to actually treatment is by chemical right now, which is being done under a study by the city of Madison right now for Starkweather Creek. I know the individuals that are working on that study. That is over by Highway 30 and 51 is the pond that they're actually looking at doing. They're looking at taking water off and actually physically treating it and what the costs are. And actually the preliminary engineering study on that one was $120,000, just to give you an idea. And that consultant is under contract. I know why, because I actually chased that when I was still working for Ecom. So the Madison Met does discharge water here. They are regulated under their own WPDS permit. That's the Wisconsin Pollution Discharge Elimination System. They have very strict requirements, and I'm not going to put a guarantee on it, but their effluent requirements are sometimes more stringent what the actual water quality limits are within the water bodies that they're discharging to, meaning the water is cleaner coming from their pipe than what's in the creek. So it's not like that everywhere, but that is the case sometimes. Also, Madison Met is leading the adaptive management program for phosphorus removal and basically trading and getting prepared to come up with a plan of how phosphorus is going to be treated and credited and what it's going to cost these treatment plants for raw sewage. And it is in the tens of hundreds of millions. So they're doing this statewide. So Madison Met is already leading a lot of this effort on what can be done locally, because they're being the lead on it because they know it's a problem, because where that's being driven from is the TMDL, which is total maximum daily load for the Rock River, and the Yahara River drains to the Rock River. So basically they have to follow those guidelines also. I know I'm getting very long-winded here. I do this, but I want to give you guys all the information because it's up in my brain and I want to present that. So these studies can get very detailed, they can get very large, they can get very complicated. Are there any questions?
Ms. Doyle?
So would it be safe to say then with Madison Metro kind of leading these different phosphorus mitigation and kind of innovative efforts that the city of Verona would probably be paying by sorts into these efforts through our participation in that system?
With that program, the areas that they're looking at are areas within the Yahara River watershed because they're in that area is within the TMDL that I referenced. Verona is not in that TMDL. So we're kind of in a unique pocket for Madison Met because they discharge effluent, which is treated wastewater, into the Badger Mill Creek, but we're not a source of stormwater runoff for the Yahara River because we discharge to the Badger Mill Creek and or directly to the Sugar Creek. So Madison Met is looking at it within the Yahara River, but how can they trade by providing treatment through the adaptive management to offset their treatment plant requirements. So they would implement a best management practice in a rural setting or within a municipality to remove phosphorus to offset what they would need to do at the plant. So, because they're more cost effective.
Other questions? Ms. Ricky, please.
So do we need a study to tell Verona what they can do to help mitigate issues, even if they're not caused by Verona? Or can we just ask the DNR or
I would say not at this point because there has been a lot of homework done already, and I would advise seeing where the TMDL is at for the Sugar River, because the ones the DNR is working on now, the Rock River is implemented, the Lower Fox is implemented, the Upper River, or the Upper Fox, which is being looked at again, the Milwaukee TMDL, I know is on the docket to be approved. That was a year and a half ago. I don't know where that one's at. And then the Wisconsin River is the next big one. So they're looking at the massive water bodies, but when I refer to the Ahar River, the Upper Fox, it includes the main water body, but all the tributaries associated with it. So for instance, when the Sugar River goes, all the tributaries that provide water to it or drain to it would be included. So essentially the Badger Mill Creek would be in the Sugar River TMDL. And where that is on the schedule, I have no idea, meaning it's that far out. So that's a question for DNR staff. So I hope I answered your question. I don't think I did directly, but being proactive will help, and some of these other communities are doing some of that legwork already. I think that's the best information I can give you right now, because the treatment capability for removing phosphorus, we need to see where that City of Madison study is at, because that is directly related to what we could do. So I would say let's see what the results of that are before we move forward.
Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just think it'd be a far better use of the $30,000 to invest that in the detention basin that we've been talking about for the better part of 6 years, which was why we initially created the storm water utility. I mean, that was part of the reason, so that we as a community could, at a regional facility, handle the water that is, picked up downtown and then pushed into the Badger Mill Creek. I mean, that was the initial plan. We've had hurdles. Some of those hurdles have been DNR related and navigable waters, and how that whole thing is panned out. So from my point of view, I'm not disagreeing that it isn't something that the city of Verona should be aware of or try to help mitigate, but really I think the better use of the $30,000 would be to apply it towards that regional facility that would handle all that downtown water.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Jacobson, please.
I would just like to say one more thing. We know phosphorus regulations are coming. There is homework being done by other entities. Let's see where those results come from, and then we can use that information from those reports and bring them back to Verona and see how we can cross-reference any of that info and use that for our projects in the future.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments on the motion? Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion was to take $30,000 from the general fund to fund the study that Mr. Diaz was talking about. So an aye vote would support adding additional $30,000. A no vote would not. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
And the motion fails. Mr. McCorsky, do we have any additional amendments?
No, those are the three that were identified.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Touche, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been thinking about these amendments, and Friday was when we got the packet. It's our first chance to look at the amendments, and at first glance, it was really hard for me to fully understand what each one meant and its impact. So I'm just thinking out loud here, but it would be really, I very much appreciate all the conversation we had. I think the CARPC discussion was very enlightening. It made me wish that my Public Works meeting didn't run over into that one, so I could have listened in on that a little bit more. But, I think it would be very valuable to have a discussion sooner so that I have more time to consider how I want to vote. Because I do feel that there's a lot of information coming at me. These are important topics. I would I would definitely like it if we could consider a process that maybe gives a little more opportunity for amendments to be discussed and then voted on later. I mean, in reality, that's true for a lot of things we vote on. And definitely committee level has an opportunity to at least debate it and hopefully hash out a lot of ideas. But I'd say these amendments, you know, other than finance, I mean, and I guess in a lot of ways they are doing some of that, but just, I know when, you know, voting tonight, you know, I was really torn on some things, and you know, I would like more time in the future. So if something can be considered to be adjusted for next year, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Touche. Ms. Doyle, please.
I'd say maybe just to elaborate on that train of thought, the Finance Committee always has a meeting where we have to vote on the budget for it to be published in the local paper. I wonder if it might be something that we could consider in the future is kind of advertising that particular committee meeting to the entire council, saying this is an opportunity to see the budget at face value. That's typically 2 weeks before we have our committee of the whole to present the budget to the entire council. So maybe if we open up that committee meeting, again, saying if you want to take a look at the budget and have ample time for amendments, then possibly we could include amendments as part of that committee of the whole budget presentation to the entire council. So then it's giving those additional weeks in between presentation of the budget as is, time for amendments, presentation of the budget plus amendments, and then we would be at this point. Just a suggestion.
I think the other thing that I would respond, and it's not a criticism towards the individuals that put forward the amendments, but local government in Wisconsin, how we operate is with a very strong committee system. And I sort of mentioned that when I talked about the budget this evening. Before we had the public hearing, it's over $13 million in levy. So I would encourage people, if they know they're going to introduce an amendment. Now, Mr. Diaz indicated that he didn't hear about one until late Thursday, I think it was, you know, and that cannot be helped. But we should use our committee structure. That's really why committees are there. And there's always an opportunity to move things forward. So I would add that as keeping that in mind as well.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need more time then between getting the form for the amendment to see what committees are actually meeting in order for that to happen. It was fairly condensed, I believe.
No, I'm just saying that what I'm saying is that we could have these conversations months in advance if we knew that the amendments are coming there. So if someone feels strongly about an issue, we should have those conversations. We shouldn't necessarily have to wait until we have a budget hearing and approval of the budget.
I would say we've been having the housing discussion, and that's probably why I felt like if we brought it here, we'd actually get some resolution on it, and we did. So it worked out great. Segue slightly, for the CARPC study, can we have more than 1 week to read it and determine if we want more out of the Town of Westport report for Verona, please?
A week is fine. I would like to get in the pipeline. I'm not aware of any other municipality that has approached them at this point. But I think Mr. McCorsky can reach out to them and get a timeline from them.
No, I'm sorry. My understanding was that we were going to get the Town of Westport report and 1 week later indicate if we wanted more in that for Verona.
I'm sure that Mr. McCorsky can email out the copy of the Waunakee, Village of Waunakee report this evening.
Okay.
And if next Monday isn't soon enough, you know, we can have the discussion. If you have questions or comments or additional things you want to see, we don't have to do that at the council. Is my point. Take a look at it. And if it's not by next week Monday, it's not by next week Monday. But let Mr. McCorsky know if you have additional items. Now, I'm saying that what Jeff will email to you is what CARPC was able and willing to do for the Village of Waunakee at no cost. We can ask them about expanding the scope, but if we expand the scope, there may be a cost. So and I'm fine with that too. And I'm fine with that. So if next week Monday isn't a long enough period of time, then that's fine. But just let Mr. McCorsky know as soon as you can.
Mr. McCorsky, it's not long enough time for me. I would appreciate at least 2 weeks, especially with Thanksgiving coming up. Really helpful. Thank you.
If I could.
Go ahead, Mr. McCorsky.
I think, well, at least we'll get the ball rolling, and we'll have discussion with CARPC while we're getting information from council members as you're looking through that. So we don't have to specifically set a date, but as long as we get the ball rolling with CARPC, we'll continue the discussion with them.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Other questions or comments? Questions or comments? So, Mr. McGilvery, we are back to your motion on agenda item 9A3. There were 3 amendments. The amendments failed, so we are back on the original motion. Is there, I'm sorry?
The First Amendment, yeah.
I'm sorry, the First Amendment did pass. So it would be the original motion as revised, reducing the fund balance by $225,000 and designating that towards the unfunded sick leave payout. Mr. Linder.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a general comment about the budget. Working on the finance committee, we started in the summer, and I also want to thank everybody for working on it. It's a long time. I mean, a lot of meetings, extra meetings. So I appreciate everybody's time, Brian's and the finance committee and the mayor and Mr. McCorsky. I really appreciate their time and whoever else was on it. I think it's a budget that is something you can be proud of with the people in Verona. I think you can be proud that you talk about 3rd reduction in the last 4 years while still adding some key people, using more or less borrowing for mill and overlay. That was something that we were talking about for 10 years and we were able to do. I think it was last year, it might have been the first year we were able to get 50-50 at least with the mill and overlay. Before we were borrowing more than we should have, or more than we would like to have. So I don't know. Mr. McCorsky hit a lot of highlights, and but I think it's a good budget. I hope we prove it, and I hope we people look at it in a positive manner, and we're proud of what we came to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. Additional questions or comments? Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of resolution number R-17-057 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries unanimously. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A4, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R-17-058, approving the levy of property taxes for city purposes.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let the record reflect that the proposed levy would be total levy of $13,329,215. $5,100,873 of that would be going toward the general fund. $3,592,674 would go towards debt service. $1,307,406 towards capital improvement projects. $281,883 towards the fire department. $792,084 towards the library. $476,938 towards the senior center. $431,499 towards Fitch-Verona EMS. $327,858 towards the library debt service, $10,000 towards refuse and recycling program, and $8,000 towards the forestry program. As Mr. McCorsky said earlier, the city portion of the tax rate would be $5.77 per 1,000 assessed value, a reduction of 4.32%.
Thank you. Questions or comments on the motion, on the resolution? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion carries. I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved with the budget. It's a very good budget, something that we should all be very proud of, and so should the residents of the city of Verona. I think it's important, though, that we also point out that when we talked before about 4 years in a row with no tax increase, 3 years in a row now that we've had reductions, that we have still been able to add services. It's easy to reduce taxes and cut expenses if we're also cutting services. We have not done that. So at the same time that we have been able to reduce the property tax, and a lot of that has to do with Epic, but we told people that that's what we were going to do. And we did. We followed through. So I think that's very important, but it's also very important to mention that when people look at their tax bill, and I had a lot of people contact me last year and said, well, my taxes didn't go down, but the city portion of the taxes went down, and we can only control what we do at the city level. So unfortunately, some of the other taxing jurisdictions didn't follow our lead, and we pretty much last year saw a flat budget, but we were down 10% last year, followed by a 4.32% this year. So just want to thank everybody for that. Mr. Touche.
Do we have any sense of the ultimate impact? I know this is really premature to ask, but you know, we just passed an over 4% decrease, and the school district, I'm sensing, is going to go up. Obviously, we don't know what the county's going to do or the college.
Mr. Lamers, do you have anything, or Jeff, that you can shed light on?
Yeah, I know crystal ball stuff, but
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we do know that the school district is going up substantially due to the referendum and the general increase. The state of Wisconsin is eliminating their property tax portion, so that portion will go down to zero, but it was a very small portion. Dane County is expecting to pass theirs tonight. It may not pass tonight. There may be additional days, which is odd because typically by the time that the municipalities do their budgets, we've got all the Dane County information in. I just expecting that it would probably be up a little bit as well. Just like the mayor said, we're going down 4.32%, but people will probably see an increase in their overall tax bill. We just have to reiterate to them that the city's portion has gone down, the others have gone up. And I think the Madison area college is going up slightly.
The Madison Tech College is going up 2.41%. From my calculation right now, the Verona Area School District is going up 11.9%. And like Jeff said, we don't have Dane County yet, and the state of Wisconsin is going down to zero, which will help a little.
Since you have the numbers, what percentage of our property tax bill will be city? Is it 20%?
No, it's higher than 20.
I'd have to do that.
Okay, I heard 27 from somebody maybe. It's almost a quarter.
I think it's actually a little higher than that, and I think it's closer to 30, if I remember correctly.
I'll look forward to seeing it in my tax bill.
What's that?
27 is closer to 30 than 20.
Someone said a quarter, so. All right, any additional comments on this, or Mr. McGilvery, anything else in the Finance Committee?
No.
All right, thank you. Old business, selection of a city council representative to the Plan Commission. Do we have any nominations? Do we have any Mr. Diaz?
I nominate Alder Gaskell.
Alder Gaskell has been nominated. Are there any additional nominations? Mr. Touche?
I nominate Alder Jack Linder.
Alderperson Linder has been nominated. Are there any additional nominations? Any additional nominations? Seeing none, I will close the nominations, and I'll ask the clerk to read the roll, please. Ms. Clark?
Alder Steiner,
Linder.
Alder Touche,
Linder.
Alder Diaz,
Gaskell.
Alder Doyle,
Gaskell.
Alder Gaskell,
Gaskell.
Alder Linder,
Linder.
Alder McGilvray,
Linder.
Alder Rieke.
Gaskell.
And the motion fails. 6 votes are required. New business, resolution R-17-059, requesting exemption from the Dane County library tax. Mr. McCorsky, did you want to speak to that issue?
Yes. Yes, this falls into the conversation we had at the last meeting regarding the increase in property assessments. The increase in minimum funding for the library increased within 1 year over $300,000. The library board, working with us, solve the situation. We wanted to utilize the debt service to reduce utilize the debt service for the library as a part of the minimum funding. They requested that it be spread out so that over 5 years, 1/5 of the amount of the debt service would be reduced each year, so that at the end of 5 years, no debt service would be a part of it, and the level of the minimum funding for the library would be gradually increased, so it wouldn't have an impact on our general fund all in 1 year. With that agreement in place, we meet the minimum funding level, and for that now we can request exemption from the library tax.
Thank you, Mr. McCorsky, for that. Questions, comments, motions? Mr. Linder?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R-17-059, requesting exemption from the Dane County library tax.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McGilvray. Questions, comments? Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. We are on agenda item 11B, approval of operator licenses. Do we have any operators licenses this evening?
I have none.
We have none. We are on announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Mr. McGilvray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight's my last meeting on the City Council. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody, staff, specifically staff that over the years has helped me grow to be a better person, frankly. They've shown me a lot of things along the way, taught me a lot. I want to thank the City of Verona and the people who elected me for giving me the opportunity to grow as a person. I've really appreciated that. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve for almost 14 years. Didn't quite make it the 14-year mark, but it's been great. I've seen a lot of wonderful projects come to fruition. I've seen the city grow in a lot of great ways that I see a lot of potential with the people in this room to continue to help the city grow. I want the people who are out there who may or may not be listening, I'm not sure how many people watch this stuff, but I want them to know that I am supportive of the people who are here, and I thought I might be emotional about the whole process, but in a way it's kind of liberating to step away. I've been joking around with my my finance committee member at meetings, just saying I don't think I'm going to miss it that much as it relates to that. I certainly will miss being able to participate in the process, and my wife is really worried about that. I think she's asked me several times whether or not I'll run for some other elected office, and frankly, I don't see that in the horizon. I might pick up guitar or bagpipes. Maybe the bagpipes are why she wants me to stay in politics, but I also really want to, I mentioned my wife, Kim. I want to thank her because, as you all know, we have responsibilities outside this building, and without my wife's commitment to meet those responsibilities, I probably would not have come across as a good a dad to my kids as I hope I have. I thank my kids for allowing me to take time away from them. So thank you, Kate, McKenna, Kieran, and thank you, Kim. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mac. You've been not only a good friend, but you've been just really, really good on the City Council. We've talked about this many times, how fortunate we are in the City of Verona to have the talent that we have. When I look at plan commission members to when we did our comprehensive plan work groups and so forth. The talent that we have here is unbelievable. And I think you brought a background and perspective that was very important into a lot of the discussions that we had. I knew it was always something that, you know, you would come, you would do your homework, and you would make your decision and do everything what you thought was in the best interest of the city. And that's what we all should do. I mean, our goal should be whatever decision, we're not always going to agree, but whatever our decision is that we do it what we believe is best for the people that elected us. And I believe that you did that. We didn't always agree, but we did that. You did a great job. You've been chair of the finance committee since 2006 when I got elected as mayor, and I can't think of anyone who could have done a finer job. You also served a number of years as president of the council. You know, when I think about all the things that you've been involved with and chairing committees and being on the Madison Area Sports Commission and all those things, a lot more meetings than a lot of people think that you have gone to. So greatly want to appreciate that. Other announcements this evening? Well, I have announcements as well. Go ahead, Mr. McGilvery.
I neglected to say I'm going to go out and have a beer after this, so if anybody wants to join.
Well, I have an announcement as well, but maybe combined, Max and I probably won't make up for what Mr. Linder had at the last meeting, but I think many of you know that my father passed away in October, and we're a very close family, and that hit me hard, and I knew it would. And I know how much he loved his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But what really didn't hit me until his funeral was how much he meant to the grandchildren and to the great-grandchildren. So the day that we buried my father, I made the decision that I was not going to run for re-election. And I didn't want to make that announcement until the budget was passed. And tonight we passed the budget. So I'm going to make sure that I give people the opportunity who are interested in running, that they have that opportunity. That's why I wanted to announce this evening. The only person that knew that I was going to do this was my wife. The only person. So when I look at the financial condition that we're in, I think back to when I got on the council, where we were with reserves and how we actually had to levy more money at the time to build those reserves up to where they should be. Take a look at the facilities. One of the things I was going to say is that by the time I finish my term, I will have spent nearly 20% of my life as mayor of this wonderful city. Over a third of my life will have been on the Verona City Council. Over 40 years, I've gone to local government meetings either as an elected official, most of those years, or appointed to serve on some committee or whatever, over 40 years. So when I saw how much it impacted my father's grandkids and great-grandkids, I knew I had to take a break. And I say take a break because I love it so much, and I think there's a good opportunity that I come back. But for now, I want to spend time with my family and with my 5 grandkids that are very important to me. So going back to on the facilities, we're to the point now where we're looking at doing something with the public works facility. I was involved with going back to that facility and all the other city facilities that were built. That's something that I really wanted to see done. We have had to replace a couple of key personnel. We've got Jeff and Brian and Theron. I won't mention Bernie and David, they've been here a long time. But key personnel who have been replaced. I think we have the best staff that we could possibly have as a city. So there's never a good time. I didn't get everything accomplished that I wanted to get accomplished, but most of what I wanted to get accomplished. And one of the most important things to me was the closure of the Epic TIF and living up to the promise that we had to the people that we were going to reduce the taxes. Even after we did it, some people didn't believe that we did it. We said we were going to do it, and we did it. You don't see that happen a lot of times, but we did it here, and it's something that we all ought to be very proud of. So with that, I have no intentions of this being my last meeting tonight, but I plan on being here till April, but appreciate you giving me the time to announce that. Any additional announcements? What's that?
Yes, I'm running for
You're running for mayor? Okay. There's no other business before us, so a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray, seconded by Mr. Touche. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.